What's going on, my fellow A-plusers? Welcome back once again. It is I, your host, Adam Perez, back at it as we're here live streaming over on our YouTube page, along with us over on Facebook as well, as we're set to go ahead and bring you Titans Season 3, Episode number 5, titled Lazarus, ladies and gentlemen, as we got to deep dive into Jason Todd a little bit here, as homeboy wind up getting himself a spotlight episode. Shout out real quick to Kieran Walters that plays Jason Todd, aka Robin, aka Red Hood. Incredible performance here this week. I really do have to say, I thought a combination of him acting opposite of somebody as talented as Ian Glenn really stole the show for me here this week. I thought they really delved into some great emotional aspects. Clearly get an opportunity to see the struggle in which Jason Todd is certainly dealing with. I mean, granted, I always knew that Jason Todd's story was a tragic story, but to see it kind of play out in this way in Titans in regards to seeing just over in season 2, the tremendous amount of pain that this guy had to go through, near-death experiences, rejection, and things like that, always feeling like a fuck up, having everybody blame him for everything, and see how his mind sort of handles it here into season 3. I just really thought it was a great deep dive into him, getting the opportunity again to see how tragic his story is, and see exactly how he wind up becoming Red Hood, and really get into his mindset in regards to what pushed him sort of over that edge, or everything that's kind of built up to push him into this position that we find him in here in season 3. So incredible stuff. I honestly thought that we wind up getting in here, and shout out to the writer Brian Edward Hill. If that name sounds familiar, he has written a few episodes of Titans already from season 1 along with season 2. I believe he wrote the Bruce Wayne episode in season 2. He might have had 1 or 2 episodes that he wind up writing, and if that name sounds familiar, it probably should, because he's going to be the upcoming writer for the brand new Power Ranger reboot movie that we're supposed to be getting from Jonathan Entwistle here within the next year or two. So this was a great sort of refresher for me to continue to solidify why Brian Edward Hill is such an amazing writer, but to, again, be able to tackle the Jason Todd stuff, the Bruce Wayne stuff on a really great sort of psychological manner, I thought was handled incredibly well in here. And I will say this also, I know that there is some pushback for some people that may not necessarily like Ian Glenn sort of as Bruce Wayne, or may not be able to necessarily see him as sort of a Batman. And while because of the fact that he is an older Batman in here, I understand the idea of seeing Ian Glenn or picturing him with the cape and cowl on is really difficult for some people to wrap their head around. But I will say this, in regards to him showcasing his Bruce Wayne side, I've loved him as Bruce Wayne. I thought he's just done such an incredible job in regards to it, especially when you need an older Bruce Wayne that's been through some shit in his life, right? That has lived in Gotham City, has seen what it has clearly done to people. I think he just showcases that in his performances so incredibly well. And just a really daunting task in here for a character like Bruce Wayne to have to talk to somebody like a Jason Todd, make these sort of tough decisions for him while you're clearly doing it with his best interest in mind. I mean, talk about just terrible timing, right? It was just really absolutely terrible. And I just really love how this season has kind of come along, to be honest with you. I mean, I've been hella impressed. I mean, last week's episode, I talked about the idea that, look, we had 3 stellar episodes. Pacing was phenomenal. Episode 4 was clearly like the let's take our foot off the gas a little bit, change course, highlight Starfire a little bit, great change of pace. But the idea that this episode solely wanted to focus on Jason Todd, I thought was a great choice, honestly. Right after his fight that he wound up having with Nightwing in the woods, we clearly come to find out a much stronger relationship between him and Jonathan Crane. And I thought this episode did a great job of really putting all the pieces together to show us how we wind up getting not only to the beginning of season 3, but also to this point in time that we're at here in the storyline. So impeccable work, guys. From the direction to the writing. If you ask me, season 3, episode 5, some people I was talking to on Twitter said this was their best episode they had seen of the season, which is hard to do when you've had some really solid episodes so far. But this one just had a little bit of everything. It didn't necessarily have the great sort of action and fighting and teamwork camaraderie, But in regards to a character spotlight, focusing on what brought this character to this point, I thought they did a remarkable job in there. And there's just something about, I don't know what it is, about the idea of sitting down with a therapist, that psychological aspect, seeing somebody kind of pick his brain a little bit, see why he's doing the things that he's doing, having that character maybe understand himself just a little bit more. I'm a sucker for that type of stuff, like that character study, if you will. I'm a sucker for it. So was a really, really big fan of it. But going back to just the tragic story of Jason Todd here, I mean, to be able to see somebody like a Jonathan Crane really speak to Jason Todd and dive sort of into the things that he certainly wanted to hear. A very unlikely mentor for Jason Todd, really using this young boy to his advantage. You know, even the idea of like seeing Jonathan do something as subtle as holding up his inhaler and making Jason inhale it, whether that be at the beginning of this episode or towards the end, it felt just very like pedophile-y to me, very like puppet mastery, right? Somebody pulling the strings of somebody else that maybe doesn't necessarily, I don't want to say Jason doesn't necessarily know what he's doing, but with the revelation here of seeing the Lazarus pit introduced, right? That was one of the questions, as how did he come back to life if he was clearly dead? The fact that they hinted, or not didn't hint, but they literally showed there was a Lazarus pit at the bottom of Arkham Asylum. And also getting to see that the serum in which Jason Todd is using for Jonathan Crane in here, those are two big impactful things that can certainly change somebody's perspective, their personalities. You know, so it does make me wonder, does Jason truly know what he's currently up to? Or are there just so many other things happening in his body that's forcing him, I don't want to say forcing him down this path, but putting him down a path that's, I don't necessarily know if he's coherent enough to understand that this is all the stuff that he's been asking for. So great episode. I absolutely loved it in here. If anything, going back to the Jason Todd and Bruce Wayne stuff, you know, early on in this season, I don't want to say they paint the picture of Bruce Wayne being this asshole. I mean, he is an asshole, right? I mean, it's not a far stretch to see that he does in fact sort of weaponize his Robins for his own sort of personality disorder comfort, if you will. You know, there is something terrible about that aspect of Bruce Wayne that clearly allows him to put these people in harm's way. And while he certainly doesn't handle grief very well, comes across as an asshole, and this episode in general solidifies that there is a level of caring that Bruce Wayne has. It may not necessarily come easy to him, but the fact alone that he calls Jason Todd his son, clearly they're close to one another, right? There is a level of care that Bruce Wayne certainly has for him. And I love the fact that you do get Bruce Wayne trying to do the right thing by Jason. As much as Bruce Wayne has effed up in his life, the fact that he now looks at Jason and realizes that this is my son. You know, I'm seeing my own son kind of be tortured by the things that I've kind of put him through, or things that he's experienced by being under my tutelage. And the idea that he makes that decision to stop him from being Robin for his own good, if you will. Very thoughtful, great decision making by Bruce Wayne, but just terrible timing, if you ask me, right? Like it literally comes off the heels of Jason literally telling us and telling the psychologist that pretty much he doesn't know what his life is like without Robin. Robin is that freedom that he certainly has that allows him to do whatever he wants to, feel free, not have to necessarily remember his past and all the effed up things that he's had to experience in his life, right? And I love the message that the psychologist gives him, in the sense that, you know, there are people out there that like you for who you are as Jason Todd, not necessarily as Robin, that you're more than just that costume that you certainly wear, that at some point in time, you will be able to look past being Robin and just embrace yourself and want a better life for yourself. The idea of being Robin doesn't make you who you are. And I love that idea of the psychologist really kind of understanding the struggle that Jason's going through, his dependency on being Robin, and that journey that she wants to take with him to deciding for himself. Do you want to be Robin or do you want to be Jason Todd, sort of thing, right? And literally right after that meeting, you get that conversation with him and Bruce. Now you get to see that he's trying to pull away the one thing that Jason loves so much and depends on so much to kind of really get by and handle the situations and mental situations that he's in that he is yet to actually confront with anybody. So again, great intention by Bruce, maybe not necessarily the best execution, and just clearly not the best timing in the world. You know what I mean? So, could Bruce Wayne have clearly have done more? Absolutely. But I am at least glad that they showcase that he's not just always a hard ass and not always an asshole in making terrible decisions. While he made a great decision here, maybe a little too late, unfortunately, for somebody like Jason. And you could see where that grief, maybe that guilt kind of comes from Bruce, knowing that he tried, but maybe didn't try hard enough or not soon enough. You know what I mean? And I love what Brian Edward Hill, the writer, was able to do with this episode and really showcasing both sides of the dilemma, lack of communication. And I'll even go ahead and say this. Props to Bruce Wayne for somebody who's clearly not altogether in his head to suggest the idea of going to therapy, to having a psychologist talk with you. I am a big for those of you who don't know, I am a big advocate for getting mental health. I honestly think it should be a requirement for every person, that's living, has a psychologist of their own, somebody they can literally talk to about things that they feel they can't share with anybody else, or issues that they're struggling with from their past that they have yet to kind of overcome. Mental health is so incredibly important. And I know that there's just a sense of negative stigma towards it. Maybe it's a pride that we certainly have as people from time to time, but it helps. And for me, even watching this episode, knowing the struggle that Jason Todd's is dealing with after his second meeting with that psychologist, go back and watch that scene when he's leaving the house after what seemed to be a really very insightful and eye-opening experience for Jason. The idea that he can choose who he wants to be, at some point in time, Robin or Jason Todd. Rewatch that scene when he leaves the house and he's crossing the street. He's got a swag about him. He's got a little tiny smirk, a little tiny smile. There's a little bit of confidence and understanding that maybe things will be okay. And then when you watch him, very subtly, his mood changes once he sees Bruce Wayne's car pull up. I don't want to say that's one of his best performances, but just the subtlety alone of showcasing the hope that Jason Todd has, and then maybe the fear that he gets immediately when Bruce Wayne pulls up to go ahead and pick him up. I don't know if Kieran Walters meant to do that or if that was something the director asked for, but subtle. But I really enjoyed it because that immediately landed us into that scene between Bruce along with Jason, where he's really misconstruing everything that Bruce has. Well, you don't believe in me anymore? That's not what he's saying, bro. That's not what he's saying. He's literally trying to save you. But he's just so far gone to the point to where he really just doesn't want to listen to reason, or again, just that idea of being so attached to being Robin, that being his only freedom in his life. You pull that away from him. What else is he, right? And so you clearly see the idea of him going to these great lengths to try and be everything that he thinks Bruce needs him to be, right? Bruce is only doing this because he thinks, I'm afraid, I'm scared. And to be able to see him take his own mindset and decide, I'm going to go ahead and talk with Jonathan Crane about possibly overcoming these particular fears and really just falling down the rabbit hole and manipulation, none other, by Jonathan Crane, I thought was showcased absolutely beautifully in here. So, as much as I give Jason Todd sort of a hard time, especially at the end of season 2 of why did this guy leave? Why? Because his girlfriend broke up with him, sort of thing. Come on, man up, man. If you really go back and watch season 2, which I certainly did, after everything that this man has certainly been through, it does not surprise me that unfortunately we've gotten to this point of Jason Todd, an unfortunate and tragic story in here, guys. But I definitely want to know what you guys think. Shout out to real quick to Lawrence in here who wind up popping up for this episode going live today. So thank you very much for that, Lawrence. But I am very curious to know what you guys think. If anything, let your thoughts be known in the live chat or the comment section box below. But great dynamic between Jason Todd and Bruce Wayne. So shout out to Kieran Walters along with Ian Glenn for just doing unbelievable stuff. You don't need a costume to be my son, is what he said. If that doesn't hit you in the gut, man, I don't know. I don't know what is. You know, like just the idea of Bruce referring to him as his son. It felt like those words were almost painful to come out of the mouth of Bruce Wayne, but once he put it out there in the world, I think he clearly took ownership of it, and he definitely wanted the best for his son, even if that was to strip him of him being Robin, which, if you ask me, I thought was a great decision, but again, a little bit too late. We did talk about very early on from episode 1-2 about the idea of what is it that Jason Todd was taking. I definitely tended to be right in that regards. The idea of a retrograding or a reverse engineering, if you will, the idea of his fear serum to make sure that it's to not be afraid. So we definitely nailed that for sure. And really cool honorable mention in regards to some of the Rogues Gallery weapons that we wind up seeing in the Batcave when we see Jason Todd open up the safe. I mean, we had the Catwoman goggles and her whip, Joker cards, a cool Scarecrow mask, if you ask me, also along with like his fear serum. There were a couple, I think there was like one or two more other things. I think it might have been Ra's al Ghul's sword, perhaps, that might have been in there also, which is a great sort of nod to the idea that the Lazarus pit was going to be in this episode. I thought that was actually pretty awesome as well. Who else we got in the live chat? Nathan, what's up, Nathan? Appreciate you coming through. He says this new season has been really good. This was a great episode. Yeah, I definitely agree with you. Again, an episode that really lacked action, but really delivered in just character development and storyline in here. And you know what, though? I will say this, you know, the one thing, too, that I think really does help season 3, and it didn't necessarily click with me until I read an article this past week from Collider.com, where the showrunner himself actually spoke in great detail about the season. You know, one of the things that we talked about was like, you know, man, season 3 feels so incredibly different, right? Like it feels just gritty. It looks like they put so much money behind the budget itself and things like that, right? Like really up the ante. And what the showrunner said, and I didn't even consider this, was that the reason why the show feels the way that it does is the setting of the show. The fact that this show is in Gotham, right? We're not, you know, season 1 was very much trekking across the US, different locations, right? Season 2 was very much so more laid back, sort of San Francisco. It's got a whole new different vibe to it. But Gotham City just brings a whole nother aura and just tone to this season that works extremely well. And he also said not only the fact that we changed our setting to Gotham, so things are darker and grittier and things like that. He says, but despite as terrible as COVID-19 certainly is, there was a little bit of an added benefit to it. And what I mean by that was he mentions the idea of just emptiness, right? Not a lot of people on the streets. Feels lonely, feels dark, feels empty, feels unsafe. You know what I mean? And he talked about the idea of like how having less people in the room, social distancing and things like that really add just a weird and just terrifying aura. It feels like a very gritty aura to that of Gotham City. And if you ask me, it honestly really helped elevate this season to heights that I didn't know that Titans could even go. But I will say this too, the writing this season has been spectacular. I don't know exactly what changes they wind up making. I think the writer itself really talked about having a much better focus on the characters, not spreading themselves too incredibly thin. And I think it's certainly been paying off for them. Now, granted, when it comes to Titan seasons, I feel like the first half of the seasons tend to be great, but really landing the finale and landing the finish and that build up towards the end can sometimes get a little bit, you know, iffy. I'm really loving the momentum so far here, and I'm really hoping that it winds up sticking its landing in this season. because it's been doing some incredible work. You know, I was really skeptical trying to figure out how they were going to go ahead and pull the trigger, no pun intended, on this Red Hood storyline, considering the fact that in the comic books, there's clearly a vast amount of years that separate the Jason Todd death moment to the return of, or the Red Hood sort of debut, if you will. But I thought that they've handled it so incredibly well, integrating just perfect characters like the Scarecrow to make that Jason Todd story work for a more modern time, shorten that length, if you will. I just thought this episode was so incredibly handled. So shout out to the director, shout out to the writer and Brian Edward Hill, and again, Kieran Walters along with Ian Glenn for just putting in amazing performances here this week, guys. I was actually really impressed. But listen, guys, at the end of the day, I definitely want to go ahead and know your guys' thoughts. Listen, if there's anything in particular that I might have missed from this episode, whether that be character development, characters in general, storyline details that you want to further explore, definitely go ahead and let me know your thoughts in the live chat or the comment section box below, and I'll definitely go ahead and join you guys in the comments to go ahead and further this discussion. So what did you guys think about Jason Todd's scenario here, his story? What did you think about Bruce Wayne, how he handled things, and how you guys think the season is definitely going? Certainly go ahead and let me know your thoughts. But other than that, guys, I think that's going to go ahead and wrap it up for us here today. If anything, feel free to also join us every Sunday going live at noon Central Time, where we go ahead and have our live episode of APlus Hero Report, where we wrap up all the week's news for you guys and answer your guys' live viewer questions. So if you do have a live viewer question, whether that be about a news article you read, a television show you watch, feel free to submit it over to aplusopinions@gmail.com. Again, that's aplusopinions@gmail.com, and we'll answer all your questions at the end of APlus Hero Report every Sunday afternoon live at noon Central Time. So other than that, guys, that's going to go ahead and do it for us. Oh, real quick, Nathan did pop in. He says, I think Scarecrow changed up that formula he gave to Jason Todd. Well, that's a good point that you bring up, because Jason was able to go ahead and actually make the serum himself, or that formula himself. But clearly Scarecrow held back some necessities that he certainly might need, or he claims that he certainly did. So getting the opportunity to see Jason not only purchase the warehouse, see how he wound up putting the formula together, again, putting all the pieces together that we've been watching over the past 4 episodes, and wrapping it up here in episode 5 to show us how we got to where we're at. You could be onto something there, Nathan, right? He could have added maybe something a little bit more, or to something that even bigger push that maybe Jason Todd certainly needed to go ahead and do and accomplish whatever he certainly needed to. So you might be onto something there, Nathan. We'll see as the season progresses. But other than that, guys, that's going to do it for us here. If anything, again, feel free to comment below at the bottom. If you love our content, do us a big favor. Hit that like button, guys. It definitely goes a long way. And feel free to join our family at any time by hitting that subscribe button along with that bell notification. So anytime we drop a brand new video, you will certainly be notified. So until next week, guys, do me a big favor. Take care of yourselves, take care of each other, and as always, keep it A+. See you next Thursday, guys. Have a good one. Bye. If you enjoy our content and want to be a part of helping our channel grow, become a patron supporter. We have affordable tiers to choose from that offer a variety of exclusive and early access content, from audio files for all of our shows for you to enjoy on the road, access to our Discord community, and plenty of reactions, reviews, character breakdowns, and more. Check us out at patreon.com/aplusopinions. And as always, remember, like, subscribe, and hit that bell notification so anytime we drop a brand new video, you will be notified.